At the beginning of the 20th century, in the heart of an industrial city in the United States, young Dr. William Carter, or simply Will, arrived at the local public hospital. With his pristine white coat and a mind full of dreams, he carried the conviction that every life could be saved with the right dose of effort and knowledge. He believed that medicine was a battle against death, a sacred mission to save lives at any cost. Will quickly gained a reputation for dedication. The staff noticed his enthusiasm and his skill in handling the most complex cases, especially among weakened patients. But for him, each patient was a new challenge, an opportunity to prove his worth. During one of his first shifts, Will was assigned to care for Thomas Evans, an elderly patient with advanced lung disease. Seeing him for the first time, Will noticed Thomas's serene and weary expression, as if the man himself had accepted his fate. But Will did not see it as an end. No, he believed that with the right treatment, he could extend Thomas's life, and perhaps even give him a chance at recovery. Thomas observed him with an understanding look, perhaps already sensing the young doctor's desire to fight. But he did not question. He allowed Will to try, without objection. Will felt the weight of his responsibility grow. He knew he would face challenges, but he was determined to prove to himself and to the world that medicine knew no limits. Determined to make a difference, Dr. Will Carter began Thomas's treatment with an experimental therapy. With each application, he monitored vital signs and analyzed any small changes. He believed the treatment could stabilize Thomas's breathing and extend his life, but the result was the opposite. That night, Thomas experienced severe pain and struggled to breathe, with coughs that seemed to tear through his chest. Will stayed by Thomas's side throughout the night, trying to ease the discomfort with medication. By dawn, Thomas, with a pale face and labored breathing, asked to speak. "Dr. Carter," he said calmly, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't want this kind of suffering anymore." His voice was low, but it carried a tone of acceptance. Those words struck Will like a blow. He refused to give up. To him, ceasing the fight would mean admitting defeat. He believed that medicine could not fail, and that his persistence in finding a solution would yield results. However, Thomas's exhaustion made him question himself. He wanted to save lives, but he was beginning to wonder if his determination was costing the patient peace and dignity. With the failure of the treatment still fresh in his mind, Will sought out Dr. Samuel Harris, one of the most experienced doctors at the hospital, known for his practical and empathetic approach. Harris listened intently as Will recounted the situation, observing the young doctor's face with a thoughtful expression. "Will," Dr. Harris said after a long silence, "in medicine, we need to know when to help and when to respect the limits of the body. Not all patients want a prolonged battle. Sometimes, our greatest contribution is to provide comfort." These words unsettled Will, who shook his head hesitant. "But giving up, it doesn't seem right. What if there's still something we can do?" Dr. Harris smiled sadly. "Giving up and caring are different things. It's not a weakness to accept a patient's condition. Mr. Evans may need your calm presence more than a treatment that brings more suffering." Will remain silent, processing this. Part of him resisted, but another part began to understand Harris's point of view. As they parted, Dr. Harris gave him one final piece of advice. "Observe and listen to what Thomas himself is saying. Sometimes they know what they need better than we do." The next day, Dr. Will visited Thomas with Dr. Harris's advice still in his mind. Seeing the patient in bed, he noticed the tranquil expression, even after the painful treatment of the previous night. It was as if Thomas was at peace with the inevitable, a serenity Will did not fully comprehend. In a quiet moment, Thomas began to share memories of his life. He recounted stories of his youth travels and the risks he had taken, as well as his love for his late wife. "When she died, I thought I wouldn't bear it," he said, "but over time I realized that some things are beyond our control. Death, it's part of life too." Dr. Carter, Will listened, each word from Thomas echoing as an unexpected lesson. There was a depth in Thomas's acceptance that seemed to go beyond medical understanding. For the first time, Will began to question his own beliefs about death, realizing that perhaps the patient possessed a wisdom he, as a doctor, had not yet learned. Thomas concluded with a smile. "Maybe what I need most now is to breathe in peace, without fights." Those words stayed with Will, planting a doubt he could not ignore. The following morning, Thomas's condition worsened significantly, his breathing becoming weaker. Dr. Harris observed the situation and pulled Will aside. "It's time for you to decide, Will. Thomas doesn't have much time, and it's clear that what he desires most is to depart in peace." Will stood silent. He knew he could keep trying new treatments, but the doubt in his heart was growing. Thomas's words echoed in his mind, mingled with Harris's advice. He finally understood that prolonging Thomas's suffering would not be a victory, but an unnecessary burden. Taking a deep breath, Will made his choice. He decided to ease the patient's pain instead of persisting with painful therapies. He prepared palliative care, focused on Thomas's comfort, respecting the serenity the patient himself desired. For the first time, Will allowed himself not to fight nature, but to accompany Thomas with compassion. Will entered Thomas's room with the palliative medication in hand, approaching calmly and respectfully. Thomas opened his eyes and gave a faint smile, as if knowing this was his farewell. Will administered the medication that would bring relief and smoothness to the patient's breathing and sat beside him in silence. The two spoke briefly. Thomas thanked Will for his company, his effort, and his understanding. "Life is a cycle, Dr. Carter. Thank you for understanding." Will could not respond, only squeezing the patient's hand with respect and care. In the quiet room, Thomas breathed calmly, and Will felt a peace he had never experienced. He witnessed the patient's last breath, not as a defeat, but as a natural, human, and serene moment. This experience transformed Will, who saw the true value of a dignified death. After Thomas's passing, Dr. Will Carter spent some time reflecting. He remembered the conversations with Dr. Harris and Thomas's serene acceptance, realizing how both had transformed him. Previously, he saw medicine as a fight against death, but now he understood that in some cases, his role was simply to help the patient find peace. The experience led Will to view medicine more humanely, with renewed respect for suffering and the relief he could provide. Entering the hospital again, he knew his role as a doctor had changed forever. He decided to care for his patients with the same compassion and respect he had shown Thomas, honoring the wisdom the patient had taught him.